Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that damn alphabet, you know, keeping us in the back. But no, yeah, I remember, yeah, meeting in orientation and just, I don't know, it was just easy to talk to you, and we were both like, all right, well, we're in a new place, like you especially, because you had actually moved for the whole thing, and
Yeah,
I was still living at home,
I grew up 4 hours away, so
right? Yeah, wasn't that? When I think about it, I'm like, oh, it's not the that's not the furthest to be away from home, because like that's like you can go home for the weekend with that.
there was nobody from my high school that came to the same college as me, though. So I was
That is
I was extremely relieved to find somebody else right off the bat who was also into nerdy things, also
nerdy
into
things.
art,
Yes.
also into
Yep.
nature.
Oh yes, all those things. Well, I mean, we were both biology majors starting off, which was also another like funny thing that that connected us both.
Right.
At least, yeah. And then I remember after orientation, I was like, we're not like, I don't know. Like, I think we maybe friended each other on Facebook because like Facebook was like I think that was like right when I got a
Mm-hmm.
Facebook, maybe.
Yep.
I don't know if we exchanged numbers. I don't think we did that.
Yeah, I don't remember. I think it was
I think I
Facebook.
know. Yeah, it was Facebook at first, but then um, I think it was in that first week of actual school, and I showed up for children's literature and film.
And do you remember
That
what happened on the first class?
oh my gosh, okay. I'm sure if you as soon as you start talking about it, you'll
I
remember.
missed
Do you
it.
remember?
I
You
missed
missed
the
it.
very first class because I got my schedule like all wrong, and I had chatted with you beforehand. I was like, "Hey, I'll see you at this class. That's so cool. We're in it together." Um, and I had never missed anything like a whole class unless I was like sick. My mom would send me to school unless I was like barfing or I had a fever of over 100 degrees. I would like have to go to school. Um, and so missing a class in college, like it was like the first or second day of college, I was mortified.
Yeah,
And I think I messaged you and you were shocked. And
I was surprised. You
I
didn't strike me as the type.
and I missed I was like, "Oh man, they're going to kick me out of this class." And I really want to take this class, and also this is my only friend in college is in this class, and I was really looking forward to having an opportunity to get to know other people. And I went to the professor, I think it was the next class or something, and I was like, I am so sorry. And I had no idea at the time that people miss college classes basically constantly.
Constantly. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was the first class. Children's what was it? Children's literature. What was the title of that?
Children's literature and film,
That's right.
and I mostly took it up because of the description because it talked about like folk tales and stuff and the kind of books that you know I grew up reading, which I imagine we both grew up
Yes.
reading a bunch of them because as we um, as I asked so far in this series of talks I'm having, is this just fantasy? And of course it isn't. It's never just fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much more going on. So, um, got you interested in like fantasy stuff?
Yes.
Like, was it a book? Was it a movie? Was it a cartoon?
It was probably a book. It's kind of hard to remember because I can't hardly remember a time before reading fantasy literature. So that must have been the beginning. I really like I I read as many books as I could and had a strong preference for things that were imaginative and interesting. So like especially like not being into sports that much. There were so many books about sports in children's lit. I mean, I was not their target audience. And
For sure.
I thought dragons were very cool. And so
dragons are way better than sports.
Yeah.
I feel like that's not going to be the first or only time that's going to be said on this podcast. Is for sure. Yes. Dragons are better than sports. Everybody.
Yes.
I don't know what world you live in, but they are better.
And I discovered like there was a very early book that I read called Jeremy Thatcher Dragon Hatcher that was about a boy who stumbles into a magic shop and manages to buy a dragon egg. And I'm pretty sure it's still on the bookshelf at my parents' house. That's one of the earliest chapter books that I can remember that was fantasy. And from there, I mean, there were a whole bunch of, there was like a whole girl power dragons section of the library. If you look hard enough, you know, there was like talking to dragons and dealing with dragons.
Dealing with dragons into that one.
Jane, what was her name? Jane Yolen. Didn't she write a dragon book too? Everybody. The Hero and the Crown, the Blue Sword.
Was it now with all of those like girl power dragon, specifically girl power dragon stories? Is that like, you think that was a deliberate effort to kind of rewrite the narrative of like dragons stealing like women or princesses, damsel in distress, that sort of thing?
Oh yeah, I think it was that for sure. As I got older and the internet became available, I looked some of those authors up and learned about some of their motivations for writing, and they line up, you know, perfectly with that, wanting to write a different story.
Right, yes, because if one of the big things about that first class that we had together was talking about cautionary tales, like Slovenly Peter,
is that the scissors one?
That's the one that yes. It's got the mad tailor with the scissors that cuts off Suck-a-Thumb's thumb.
Yes, terrifying.
Yeah, and remember the cats like wailing when the little girl sets herself on fire with the matchbook. Yeah, no, so that's German folktales for you. Not folktales. Those are called cautionary tales. They're household tales. They're these little rhymes. And it's in a collection called Slovenly Peter, even though that's the name of one of them. And they're basically just like, don't be a shitty kid, otherwise something horrible will happen to you. And that's kind of the message of a lot of folk tales, especially like Brothers Grimm, like folk tales. And so like that was one of the big parts of the class that we took, was reading and studying like those, and like, are these for kids, and and more specifically, how are they for children? Because they are for children, but it is like some of them were here?
Pretty gruesome.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I have a theory.
Okay, let's hear it.
And it's that it's simply because the world was more gruesome then. Like horror, like things that we would consider as like uncommonly horrible, like hacking off like losing limbs and eyes and being eaten by wolves or whatever, like those were things that just happened more back then. Like that was just a part of life. And I feel like also kids probably grew up faster then. I feel like there's this kind of golden age mentality of like back when kids were allowed to be kids, but like in any era you can go to and look, and like the culture was trying to make them little adults very fast, like always very fast. And in those days, like, you know, even when they were telling them these fairy stories, they were like, don't go where you shouldn't go, don't be a bad person, otherwise the snow wizard will freeze you to death. You know, classic stuff. Lessons that we all learned as children.
Yes. A little bit like if you
Yeah.
sit too close to the TV, your eyeballs will pop out, which is one that my parents used to say. So some of the
Yes.
gruesome cautionary tales continue to this day.
That is very true. Yeah, those are the modern versions. The like my mom this is funny in college when I had a long distance girlfriend that I would call on the phone often or spend a lot of time. My mom would be like, "You're gonna get like brain cancer or something horrible," like because the phone's on your ear so much. I'm like, Mom, you can't just make up like science. Like you just can't. Like if there was a genuine problem, of course, and I definitely, I'm like, I'll humor you, Mom. I'll read this article, and there was nothing accredited in it, and so I gave it up. Anyway, yeah, I think yeah, just using stories to like warn people, or especially children, like don't do this, or sometimes do this. Like there's stories where a character is like, I'm being nice, and so therefore I'm instantly rewarded. Like
Mm-hmm.
the the instant gratification element. I think that was something that came up a bunch. Is that like there's this transactional nature to being good, because like that's another thing in folktales is like in trying to be a little bit instructive and like what's how do you make people be nice? Well, you can scare them into being nice, or you can tell the or it's like carrot and stick.
Mm-hmm.
It's like he'll dangle a carrot in front of them and make them more interested in being good because there's a reward for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to think back to some of the titles that we read there when we were in that class. The one that jumps out that's kind of uh, turns the whole folk tale thing on its head. I think we read James and the Giant Peach.
We
Is
did,
that
yes.
and that in Roald Dahl's books, things do not have consequences from A to B, but you do see some of those same patterns of like, be good and good things will happen, like Charlie and the Chocolate
Right.
Factory and things like that.
But like eventually, it is something where the those characters go through some shit before
Mm-hmm.
the nice thing happens.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I remember. Yeah, James and the Giant Peach. The like his parents get eaten by a rhino that came out of the sky.
Yep. And then we watched.
Like
We read a series of unfortunate events.
events. Yeah.
Which
Which
is.
which is very like watch these nice people go through horrible things, and it's an interesting like it was an interesting premise, but it's also one of those things where it's like it's such a weird anomaly of like we're gonna tell a story where like we're telling you from the very beginning that it's not going to end well for them
Mm-hmm.
ever, and I just find that fascinating just that like we're gonna build a series of children's books on this
Mm-hmm.
because children enjoy Schadenfreude too, I guess.
Yes, yeah.
Is it okay? Wasn't God damn it? What was the name of our? Do you remember the name of our professor for that?
Okay, I was trying really hard to think of his name, and all I could come up with was Werner Herzog, which is not the name.
It's not her. It's not
What
Werner
was it?
Herzog.
Herzog? Was his last
Herzog.
name Herzog, or did he just talk about Herzog repeatedly?
No, he didn't talk about Herzog. I think his last name was Herzog.
Oh, good. Okay.
Because I was about to say I think his last name was Herzog, but I also might be confusing that with Werner Herzog.
Yeah, I think
Um,
that was his name. I think he studied. Did he study German? Like German theater and movies and film
Yeah,
and
and I
like
think he also taught. Didn't he teach like German language
I think so.
possibly?
Yeah, and like
Um,
thinking about it now, how like a lot of folk tales that we have today, some of them have their roots in Germany, are like morphed into how we know them today in Germany, from Germany, I think.
right. Oh yeah, for sure. What I love about folktales, especially because I've read a ton of them from a bunch of different cultures, and if you look not even just limited to Europe, like Indo-Europe tales. There's so many similarities between, like, there's the German version, and then there's the French version, and then there's the Italian version, and then the Russian version. And I love it because it's almost like all the differences tell you where it's from and what the geography is of the area.
Yeah.
It's always like comparing, because there's like there's a bunch of similar folk tales between Germany and Italy, except instead of take out mountains and like forests and replace it with coastline and the sea. And it's like, and then take out, we have farmers and millers and replace them with fishermen and, and merchants and stuff like that. And then my favorite thing is you take out the dragon and you put in an octopus. Or some sort of sea monster. And I'm just like, that's so funny that, like, because it's like structurally, character wise, it's the exact same story. It's like person gets captured, someone needs to go help them, they're kind of a bumbling figure, and it's usually, I love it when, like, so there's one in Italian folktale called Samphire Starboard.
It's a nice name.
And Samphire Starboard, and it's funny because it's basically some pirates capture a princess, and like the king like can't, like, does it, like, I think they can't pay or something like that. And this unwitting guy like joins up with the pirates, and he's a drunkard who keeps falling in the ocean and gets covered in seaweeds. So like he's covered in seaweeds, and they ended up like leaving him on the island because he's like suspicious of them, and they leave him on the island where the princess is, and it's like this octopus that for like 1 hour a day turns into a herring. And it's and so like she's aware of like, oh, when it turns into a herring, that's when you can get it. And it's it's fascinating because it's like, how come she doesn't do it? If she knows the whatever, how come she doesn't do it? And it's because she needs this drunk dude covered in seaweed to do it. I guess.
Maybe she learns delegation. They teach you that in business school, right?
Exactly.
Like, do it yourself or delegate. Delegate the thing. Only do the things yourself that you cannot delegate.
Right. Exactly. So it's leadership. It's a good skill to have. But no, yeah, like that's a funny thing that I think it's interesting seeing people get further and further away from is the typical princess and dragon relationship. I actually think it's funny that you brought up like the dragon girl power, because it's like, let's recontextualize what these two things are to each other. But then you still have shit like Bowser and Princess Peach. Okay, has it ever weirded you out that, or it's weirded me out, like we have like there's no context whatsoever for like why that keeps happening.
Oh yeah, it's weird. I didn't really think about it until I was playing the Super Mario Universe, something like that. One of the newer titles,
like 3D ones.
Yeah. And I mean, the scenes and stuff are cute. There is kind of a story, but like, what is his goal in stealing Princess Peach? And then, Princess Peach, she is established now as a character who can also beat levels and things. I mean, we had that Super Mario 2, I think. You could be Princess Peach. Yeah, so she can kick butt. What's going on here?
That's... Princess Peach has a sordid history of being a starring character, because, like, yes, she was in Super Mario 2, but the one thing that a lot of people don't either forget or don't realize about Superman 2, Super Mario 2, is that it's a dream.
It is.
The whole game is a dream.
Is that just because it was not originally? Is that the game that was not originally
It
meant
was
to
Tokidoki
be?
Panic.
Yeah, and then they decided to brand it.
They ran it Mario because it was an easier game to play than Japanese Super Mario 2. Because Japanese Super Mario 2, which eventually came to America on the Super Mario All-Star cartridge for Super Nintendo as the Lost Levels.
Oh, yeah, I never played those.
But it's basically the original game, but harder, like much harder, because one of the things they include is a poison mushroom that kills you.
Oh.
And so sometimes when you think you're getting like a bigness, it kills you. So great stuff. But apparently, yeah, the people, the Japanese developers were like, this is too hard for Americans. They're not going to enjoy it. And so let's just switch it out to, let's take Tokidoki Panic, which is easier and it's a fun game, and let's just swap out the sprites. And then, yeah, they added, like at the very end, it's Mario dreaming. It's like it's like him in victory, and then it just scrolls out, and it's a dream bubble, and he's just sleeping.
I didn't remember that. I'm pretty sure I beat that game, but I don't remember it.
It's so weird. It's also it's just funny. It's like it was only a dream.
All right, so that's why Bowser is able to successfully capture Princess Peach over and over again.
Because the only time, as far as I know, I've never played it, but I know that it exists, is that Princess Peach has her own game. I think it was a DS game, and you may have heard about it. And it's a game where she's the main character. It's a platformer, and she has like special abilities, but they are all like extreme versions of emotions. Because she's like horrifyingly emotional. So like she like starts, like one of them is extreme sadness, and she cries a ton, and like the tears fly out, and they're like projectile weapons.
Wow.
And then there's another one where she gets like filled with rage and smash, and like, so it's not great. It's not the most forward thinking ideas when it comes to like what one of our main female characters from the Mario universe. You know, it's like her power is that she's just extremely emotional.
Great.
Jesus.
Is she a Smash character?
Yeah, she is. She's a Smash character. She's like in the Mario Party, the Mario Kart, all that stuff, tennis, whatever. Like she's a character. Even I remember Mario Golf for regular Nintendo. She was like, you could play as her. But it's just like, I don't know. I think it's something that she's definitely underserved. Because I remember when they came out with Super Mario Brothers Wii, and it's like you can play up to 4 people, and it's like Mario, Luigi, a Toad, and another Toad. And I'm like, okay, if she's captured, fine, I guess. But like, why not throw Daisy in there?
Yeah.
Daisy's another character, you know, or maybe Daisy's captured this time and Peach can be in there. But yeah, so far in every new iteration of New Super Mario Brothers, like, which those are fun games, she's never a part of it. Like they'll invent new characters instead of giving her the shot at being a hero. And honestly, she was the best character to play as Super Mario 2.
Yeah, she could jump high, and didn't she have?
And she could float.
Yeah, that's right, with her skirt.
She was the best.
I mean, I think we did spend quite a few hours in that class talking about like the Disneyification of
folktales and
folktales as well, and like I'm thinking about how a lot of them, you know, obsession with being a princess or capturing a princess, like continues to drive the films that we see today, for example.
Oh, for sure.
You know, and revisiting some of the oldest, like much older stories, like did you see The Princess and the Frog?
Oh, for sure.
I mean, that one's been around for forever, and it has its own very creative twist on it, but there is ultimately that emphasis on being a princess is kind of the setup of the film. So
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things that I find interesting, and to me about folk tales is that a lot of it is, to me it's regular people, because they're the ones coming up with these stories most part, like telling them around the fireside. And I love reading them because you get these wacky details of what it's like to be a king or queen, or princess or prince or whatever, where it's just these crazy extravagancies and like these enormous palaces. And these are people who have never been inside a palace. They don't know what it's like to be a king, or queen, or princess, or prince, or whatever. And so it's a lot of them just kind of like, must be pretty great, like, because like so much of the emphasis is like never having to do work, never having like having everything done for you. I mean, I think a very famous folktale that doesn't involve the main character being a princess, but she definitely becomes one. I guess. I guess she actually becomes a queen. Is Rumpelstiltskin. With our unfortunately unnamed main character,
yes.
the miller's daughter, who is, God, I just remember even as a little kid getting really mad at her dad, at like setting her up like as like, oh, my daughter's great, she could spin straw into gold. And it's like, what's your plan, Dad? What's your what is your goal? Like, because like, what's going to happen when she fails? The crazy king kills her. You think he's not going to come after you and being like, you lied to me, you're going to die too? Like, I'm baffled at that notion. Works out for her in the end, I guess, even though one of the things that I definitely noted in reading it is, oh right, this guy is crazy. Like the king that has like caged her up is like, if you fail to do this, I will kill you. And then she does it like 3 times in a row, and then he's like, wonderful, you're now my wife, or like I'll marry you. And it's like, that's not a good solution, or like result for her. She's stuck with this lunatic who she doesn't know, at the drop of a hat, may expect her to spin straw into gold. And she's just, yeah. And then you get into the whole, there's a strange little man who wants her baby.
Yeah, that's weird.
So I see that as a connection between, because I think Rumpelstiltskin is, in a lot of ways, he's essentially like a fairy, or part of the fair folk, like the creatures who, like, basically in folklore, like can cause good things, but for the most part, like, cause diseases if you insulted them. And also like the whole changeling, slopping babies, like, which is, I was listening to something talking about changelings, and when I thought about it, like, as they described it, I'm like, what a horrible idea. Is the idea that, like, these people, they have a baby, and it is like, it's brand new, and then but then it starts like being fussy, or feeling, or sickly, or being obstinate, or whatever, and like, or just it's just like a fussy baby that like won't sleep or whatever, just always crying. And they're just like, this isn't our baby, it was stolen by the fairies, and now it's been replaced with this fussy piece of shit. And I'm just like, that's horrible. Like, what a crazy solution. And then there's a similar thing with where fairies would also abduct adults. And the way it was described, it sounds like it's like explaining someone who goes through like a nervous breakdown. Because, like, if all of a sudden you're, this person who was used to be happy turns taciturn and quiet, maybe quick to anger, like, just, like who's clearly having some emotional trauma, that's not your friend anymore. They've been swapped out with a fairy person. Like, that's crazy to me. Like, it's just because I imagine a lot of, in some cases, that eliminated people from, like, interacting with them because they're like, oh, that's not a human being. Yeah. It's like this crazy dehumanization of things that don't conform to what they want. Which, how about that as an idea that pervades folktales, is like conformity, both, and it comes down on both sides, which is interesting. A lot of because there's folktales that are like, this thing doesn't conform, get rid of it. And then there's other times where, like, our main character is the non-conformer. Like, one of my favorites, Hans the Hedgehog.
Yes.
Because how hard is it to be born a hedgehog?
That would be a very different form of life.
I fucking love that story. It's just, it's filled with such great images. One that still baffles me, and I don't understand it at all, is that in every version, or in so many versions that I read, except for ones that are, like, written up after the fact, like any old versions I see, he has bagpipes. Hans the Hedgehog from Germany has fucking bagpipes and rides a rooster and has a like a herd of swine.
I mean,
that he takes care of.
If you're shunned from society, why stop at one strange hobby?
Right, exactly. Yeah, why not just fully embrace it? And when I love, like, the image of this, like, hedgehog riding a rooster. Like, props to whichever storyteller they gathered that story from for, like, including, like, just wild details like that. Just really fascinating. And it also fits, like, the mold of, if you're a useful freak, you're acceptable. Because, like, he helps the lost kings out of the forest. And one betrays his promise and the other one doesn't. But he's just like, yeah, you could marry my daughter, I guess. Hedgehog, sorry, honey. And then the fact that, like, she, like I think her, like, the moment is, like, his final moment of being a hedgehog, and he's, like, just married the princess, and he crawls into bed with her, and she's so grossed out by him that she, like, smacks him so hard. He careens across the room, hits the wall, and then lands on the ground, and it looks like he's dead. And then that's when he, like, comes out of the hedgehog skin as a regular human being. Somehow. And I just love that, like, there's a similar thing that happens in the original, like, Frog Princess or Frog Prince. Where it's just like the final rejection is what turns him into a human being. And it's like, then Disney did that same kind of thing with Beauty and the Beast, except it's like, no, I love you. That's the final moment that turns you human.
Thing, yes.
That's the humanizing moment. Is love. And it's like, I love that's like, from a story perspective, I think that the love thing makes more sense, probably. Right?
Yeah. I think so.
Right? Instead of the ultimate rejection. I don't know. Do you remember in that class when we did Alice in Wonderland?
Oh, I remember not that many details about it. Wow. Was that the one where we sat in the front row and heckled through part of that book? I don't remember. One of the books we did.
We heckled that book for sure. what's funny is that like when we, because like we were in a class full of people, and I think we mostly stuck to the front row just because we were engaged with the material. I think,
Mm-hmm.
and we were just like sure. And there was that, I think there's at least one other person in the front row, and it was the girl who really loved Alice in Wonderland.
Yes.
And so we were right next to the person, the one, especially the one person in the whole class who was really trying to stand up for that book.
Mm-hmm.
And you and me, I mean, I think we were just like, Alice is horrible. She's so mean to these weirdos.
Mm-hmm.
Like she just travels around and yells at them for being weird.
And like ruins their stuff without any regard.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And it's just one of those things where it's like, okay, Lewis Carroll wrote this because like his neighbor or somebody had a little girl that he had a weird kind of obsession with. I don't know. There's a lot of aspersions cast on Lewis Carroll at this point in history, and I don't know the guy. I just know that like he wrote the first one as a like children love, or like children love nonsense, or like that was his whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's about like this explosion of nonsense. But what is fascinating is that that little girl Alice is 100% resistant to nonsense,
Mm-hmm.
which is so weird. That like he's like, oh, they love nonsense stories, and it's about the walrus and the carpenter. Is that what it is?
I don't remember.
And they fleece the clam or the mussel people
Mm-hmm.
into getting eaten. And then anyway, and then he writes the second book, Through the Looking Glass, which that's the one that I think was more palatable just because it like passage of it just made more sense.
Yeah.
And that was the one that with like the chess people and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about being sad that this girl's growing up and becoming more logical.
Mm-hmm.
And
That one also has the poem of the Jabberwocky in it.
this is true.
Side note, the Jabberwocky was one of my favorite weapons in Skyrim. I used it to turn a very difficult boss into a crab, and then I won.
Oh shit! We know the Wabbajack.
Yes.
That's what it's called. It's the Wabbajack. Okay. It's just Side note of the Wabbajack
Best weapon.
is incredible, and it's one of those. It's something. It's one of the things. The ways I really like magic.
Yes.
Is when it can be silly. It's like I usually say like I like the Harry Potter magic system because it can be as like rudimentary as like this is a spell that shoots a red light and it knocks whatever weapon somebody has out of their hand. Expelliarmus,
Mm-hmm.
cool. But then you also have like you can make a Mary Poppins bag.
Mm-hmm.
That has like everything in it, or like a suitcase that has a zoo in it. Like you could do like I like that just because it's creative. It engages creativity,
Mm-hmm.
which is I feel like in essence what magic really is it's this kind of it's this engaging the creative part of our minds. Fuck the Wabbajack.
Yep.
Okay.
Anyway.
We have to.
It's a side.
I mean, no, not anyway.
Side note.
I want to talk about this.
Oh, yeah.
Side note. Just because, well, just to explain to anybody who doesn't know what the Wabbajack is, in Skyrim, there's like a side quest where there's like this crazy person wandering into town, and he's like, my master is in this broken down wing of the palace, and you should go find him for me. And you go there, and you get teleported to this other realm, and it's like this god of madness is there, and he puts you through like 3 or 4 tests. 3 tests, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all he gives you his staff, which is called the Wabbajack, and that's the only weapon you can use. And it's like you make stuff bigger and smaller, or like you just keep hitting stuff with it until you win. But then after that's done, you get to keep it. And the awesome thing about it is it's a chaos weapon,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like a staff, and it basically when you shoot it at something, it's kind of like in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's the infinite improbability drive.
Yes.
where but you shoot something, and like you shoot an enemy with it, and there's a chance that you will turn them into like a loaf of bread, or a goat, or another person, or a worse enemy, like, or even like a dragon. Like, I remember one time I was like just screwing around. I was like, oh, I want to mess with this guy, so let's shoot with the Wabbajack, and he turned into a fucking dragon. And so I was like really screwed. But so yeah, it's amazing just because it's so silly. And yeah, I like turning somebody into like a mud crab.
I got really lucky. It was a difficult battle. I'm like, that's one of those things where it's kind of interesting in that, like, all these old stories are constantly showing up in modern literature, modern games, things like that. And through repetition, they become some of the most memorable things. Like, I asked me to explain the plot of Skyrim, and I know very few details, but I remember the detail that I turned a boss into a mud crab. And, like, the weapon that I used to do it. And I also remember, don't you have to get, like, some, like, you have to get, like, a pelvis, like, bones? You have to collect bones to get into the...
Yes.
Like, why do I remember that? And I think it's, like, it's cemented in, because it's, like, this one little bit of the story that's anchored all the way through back to the stories that we were told as children. There's, like, this thread that runs through your mind, connected to the present day.
The weird details. Yeah. The weird details are the fun ones.
Yes. And the fact that I remember anything about this class, and that was the book where we were heckling, because it was so weird. But that was a very long time ago. But I remember.
It was, but I remember heckling just because we were like, because we were just like, this isn't a good story.
Yeah.
Like, there's no plot. It's just her meandering around, like, yelling at people. And I think the nicest thing we were to say is, like, the imagery's interesting, like, but that's about, like, it's so nonsensical, or it's so meandering. It's the, like, I feel like there's a lot of people who will say, like, because there's movies that have that kind of feel to it, where it's just like, you're just kind of wandering from place to place, and like, then this happens and this happens, and it's over, and it's not about character growth, because Alice as a character doesn't grow remotely, no way. So yeah, we were upset with that. I remember I blew Herzog's mind when I think I said that I enjoyed the book Wizard of Oz more than the movie, like, as a story, and I was very wrong. No, the movie's definitely better. 100%. But no, okay. So you say, like, you mentioned, like, folktales coming up in other things. Did you watch The Witcher?
Oh yeah, I did.
Did you notice?
Wait, do we need to give spoiler alerts? Spoiler alert for anyone who's watched.
Spoiler alert.
Hasn't watched The Witcher yet.
The Witcher. You should, because I always say, when it comes to wanting more fantasy things, I vote with my money. So it's like, if there's a fantasy movie, no matter what it is, I'll pay money to see it. Even if it sucks. But I just want them to make more of it. Yeah. I give those a pass, mostly because I like that world, and production design is great. Is it the best version of the story? Absolutely not. It's not. But I'm willing to give them a pass because I like that world.
Yes.
But The Hobbit. but I forget which episode it was, like 5th or 6th or something like that, maybe. In The Witcher, there's a point where it's the key moment where Geralt like, becomes connected to the little girl. It's like a wedding, or like the feast at the wedding. Do you remember there was a character who was beastly? In fact, you could say he was a hedgehog man.
He was a little bit spiky.
He was, that was Hans
not in, like, the Guy Fieri way. actually
Right,
spiky.
Actually spiky. No, but he was that's what that was.
Mm-hmm.
It was Hans the Hedgehog.
I was excited.
And he was basically because he was promised to the princess or whatever, but she was like in love with him.
Mm-hmm.
Which I thought like, oh, that's a good nice spin on it. So she's not like, ooh, gross, I'm gonna throw him up against the wall. He was human sized, which does make sense of him, like, would be making sense of him turning human again.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you don't have to worry about like expanding sizes. Like he peels off the skin, and now he's a full size man again. So, but it's magic. Who cares? You can do that. How do you explain him riding a rooster? Yeah, this is just a big rooster. But no, yeah, I like it when little things like that come up. I mean, me and my Baba Yaga, whenever she shows up in anything. Like I recently got back into video games in a crazy way, like buying over 30 games.
Ooh, that's quite a marathon
30 games
setup.
In right around Christmas time, because Steam had its sales, and I bought at least just the first two of the newest Tomb Raider games,
mm-hmm.
which I have played through both of them, and I enjoyed them a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I thought they were awesome. But in the second one, it takes place in like a remote part of Russia, and there's this. It was like a DLC apparently, that involves Baba Yaga, and has like her chicken hut, or her hut on chicken legs.
Amazing.
And everything. It's explained in the universe like how that would work. Like there's a reason that we're seeing it, but I'm just happy to see it, and and she's rightfully imposing, but no, yeah, anytime that shit pops up in anything, like I think apparently like there are video games where like they'll just throw her hut
mm-hmm.
in it. They'll just have it there because it's and then apparently there's a game, and I can't play it, which I'm upset about. It's called Yaga.
Oh.
And it's about this one-armed woodsman, and it's like him like fighting monsters in the woods, but like he deals with Baba Yaga, like he it's, I don't know if she's like his like resource, her fence, or his fence, like she gets him all the stuff he needs
mm-hmm.
to like succeed or whatever, or if she's the antagonist, I don't know. But I'm just like, oh, cool. It's like a whole game based on that. Which, by the way, anybody listening who doesn't already know, which you should if you're listening, Baba Yaga is not Russian for boogeyman. Fuck the writer of John Wick. Did you know that?
I don't remember the John Wick reference, but
John Wick.
I watched John Wick, but.
See, that's funny. So the first
I watched it like this.
Oh,
between my fingers. Dan knows that I can't handle like certain parts of The Witcher. I was like so grossed out, like.
Right.
But I made it through.
You made it through.
Yeah, and so I watched John Wick through my fingers as well. I don't remember.
Anyway,
that reference
it's
in
really
John Wick.
There's they have Russian gangsters, and they say that John Wick's nickname among the underworld is Baba Yaga. And I remember when I first saw the movie and I heard that, I'm like, so they're calling him a horrible old woman.
Yeah, that's an interesting choice.
But what the movie tries to sell is that Baba Yaga means boogeyman. And it doesn't mean that.
No.
It just doesn't. Like, it's a dumb choice on their part, and I will never forgive them for it. I enjoy the movies quite a bit. I think they're great. But that's just something so monumentally stupid that I just can't accept it.
The scariest Baba Yaga I saw was in a movie that is not Hellboy. It's the thing that you might think is Hellboy, but it's not Hellboy.
Yes,
movie.
You're right.
Yeah.
That movie that's
the
not
knockoff
Hellboy,
Hellboy, the like dollar store version.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah, no,
That was
it
a
was a very creepy
great
design.
scene. I was scared. So
It was very she was very creepy. Um, I don't know. My love of I love what Baba Yaga comes from the fact that like there's so many cool visuals, like her like the fence of bones
mm-hmm.
with the human skulls with the glowing eyes and the house on chicken legs and uh, like the fact that she flies around in a giant mortar and pestle.
Again, if you're an outcast from society, might as well embrace multiple
Go for
hobbies
it.
that you
Yeah.
anything your heart desires. Fence of bones? Sure.
Right. But what I also like about her is that in she's in tons of stories,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like more often than it's like sometimes she's an antagonistic force, sometimes she's just a part of the journey where like people either avoid her or need to run away from her or need something from her, and sometimes she's like she's the character who helps the hero get what they need
Mm-hmm.
to succeed. Like um there's one in Russian folk tale called Fennis the Falcon, where uh, dude's name is Fennis the Falcon, and he could turn. I think he can turn into a falcon. He's a magical folk,
Mm-hmm.
and he falls in love with a princess, and she gets captured by Koschei the Deathless, who's another real creepy character in Russian folklore. Who like he's you know Koschei the Deathless?
I don't think I do.
Koschei the Deathless is really cool because he is um, in my opinion, he is a big inspiration for the concept of Horcruxes.
Oh,
In
okay.
Harry Potter, because his whole thing is that he's because there's also there's a I think it's an English folktale, or I think there's probably a German one too. It's called "The Giant Whose Heart Was Not in His Body," and it was basically this idea that the villain of the piece took his heart out, hid it somewhere, and then he was invincible. So you had to kill the heart to kill them. And it's a similar thing where it's basically Koschei the Deathless. He's deathless because he took his soul out of his body and hid it on the head of a needle, um, inside an acorn, inside a bird, inside a fox, inside a lion or a bear, and then buried underneath like an oak stump in a chest.
Several layers.
So like there's like
mm-hmm.
6 or so layers of protection,
Like a
and so
turducken, an evil
exactly.
magical turducken.
Exactly. But so like he was this like monstrous person who his part in folktales generally is stealing brides on their wedding day.
How rude.
That seems to be his thing. Oh yeah, and he steals them and chains them up, and then the hero has to go rescue them. And then at least one of these stories, I'm not sure if it's Fence the Falcon now because I'm confusing. I might be connecting it with other things, but anyway, one of the Koschei's things is he has a super fast horse. It's like a magical horse that is just faster than any other horses, and he got it from Baba Yaga. And so the hero has to go to Baba Yaga because she has these amazing mares that are faster than anyone, and basically have to do something to convince Baba Yaga. But then he eventually gets one of their horses to rescue his wife. So it's like, okay, cool. So like she's just got different roles, and it's just I like something that old has that complex of a character. Because, and I'll ask you this. If you don't have the answer, that's fine. Can you think of a time when Hera wasn't a bad guy in the Greek mythology?
No.
Like, she's not supposedly a villain, like her villainous god, because she's like goddess of the hearth and the home and motherhood and all that stuff. But yet, in any story I can think of, she's the enemy. She's the reason that a bunch of horrible shit happens. She's the reason that Heracles murders his family a couple of times. So like it's interesting. That's like, I don't know. Folktales have a sordid history with powerful women.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's weirdly enough, except for sort of in Russia, because the classic folk heroine or folk hero, as a neutral term, folk hero of Russia is Vasilisa, who's known as Vasilisa the Beautiful, or Vasilisa the Wise, or Wise and Beautiful, and she's a character that is in a ton of maybe not as many folktales as Baba Yaga, but she is this heroic figure who, in like one of the most popular tale, she faces off against Baba Yaga to get light from her, which I always love that like the light she gives her is one of the skulls.
Ooh.
Which is so cool and eerie, and then when she returns back to her evil stepmom and stepsisters, the light from the skull like burns them to ashes.
That's dramatic.
So she has a laser skull. Is what I'm saying. Laser light skull. So like that's something fascinating to me, but I don't know. I think it's neat that she's this kind of classic heroic character. And I don't know. I wouldn't know if I would necessarily call, like, say, Snow White the hero of the story.
Nah.
Or I mean, Cinderella, I guess. Although she's helped by her. Well, in the original story, it's not a fairy godmother. Do you remember what it is?
No. Remind me.
It's vaguely implied as her mom's like spirit.
Oh, okay.
That because it influences like birds and mice to help her do
Gotcha.
things. Mostly it's birds, because they help sort the like the lentils from the ashes when the stepmom dumps them in there, and they help her with everything.
I think the trouble with those stories is your main character set up as the person who's like the victor, who's successful, triumphs, etc., or are they the person who needs to be saved? And like, do they get themselves into the right place and the right time in order to be saved?
Right. Well, and say the example of Cinderella, which is one of the most famous stories ever.
Mm-hmm.
It only goes well for her because she has this kind of magical intervention.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the story of somebody who starts off low and ends up high, basically, like the rags to riches story. Because oh shit, remember we read Ragged Dick?
Yeah, I do.
Oh my god, now I need to look up the name of the writer of that because I can't remember it.
I don't remember either.
I'm Googling Ragged Dick,
That's in your search history forever now.
Yeah. Ragged Dick, it is by Horatio Alger. It's a Horatio Alger story. The Rags to Riches story. And yeah, like that even relied upon essentially a semi-magical intervention of just like this rich person noticed them and pulled them and like noticed like you're plucky and whatever, you can't be brought down, I'm gonna give you everything, and it's like, oh, okay, cool. So I feel like generally, I don't know. I mean, not to disparage them because I love them, but like, folktales don't really give you a path from a lower position to a higher position. Like, and like even in like, let's say an emotional sense. Like, let's just say somebody's sad, and you want to go from rags to riches that way. Like rags being like depression and riches being happiness. Most of them, I would say, don't offer that.
I think that's accurate.
And perhaps is that could you say that it might be just related to the toughness of the time in which they come from, and it's just like, yeah, only God's gonna get you out of this, or only some sort of supernatural intervention is going to get you out of this. Because imagine a lot of people lived and died pretty rough. And it's only the special ones that get a special help.
Yep.
Can get out of it.
Yep. It's probably some of that. It's also like, there's a lot of people who it's beneficial to them if everybody stays at the station that life initially gave them, and how much of the perpetuation of these stories is tied into like people who are in power continuing to be in power, and like they're like there's the term revisionist history, but we also have like revisionist fiction of some sort. Like, what's the stuff that gets to be popular? Why? Who funds it? Like, the rich people had the books, right? For the longest time, the poor people were illiterate. And like, I haven't studied any of this, but like, frankly, I would be shocked if there aren't like 12 very well written research works that try to tie this together. So maybe it's some of that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and I think there's just there is something interesting to me too, that these people who, the people who are on top, happy to be on top, continue to be on top, and are fine with people being where they are. Are these are still the subject of a lot of these folktales?
Yep.
Like the poor people are telling stories about them, and not including themselves in it.
Yeah.
Which is also interesting, because like you think about a classic folktale, like Sleeping Beauty. There's not like there's maybe one like peasant in it, but everybody else is somebody of higher stature, like a noble or somebody who works at the castle, which I guess you could say is a peasant there, but like it's never about them, or rarely about them.
It'd be interesting to compare and contrast some of these like things that we know as like very old written works to like things that existed longer as oral history, and like
for sure
how much do those themes change. I don't know.
I mean, I don't know. I like something that I like about fantasy is that it takes real references to the way life is, the way life is experienced, and just adds, a little bit of flourish to it. Sometimes a lot of flourish, and sometimes so much flourish that that's pretty much all it is.
Or that's all you can see. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I've really enjoyed. For a while, I read as many like fairy tale rewrites as I could. So, one of the most famous ones, for example, is Wicked. Most people know of the musical.
Right,
but it's sort of a retelling of The Wizard of Oz, which I don't know if you would say Wizard of Oz is a fairy tale. It's a fairy tale of a kind, right?
Yeah,
And then that same author wrote several other fairy tale rewrites, and I'm trying to think of who some of the other authors were. There was another. Did Robin McKinley write some of them? I think she did. Like maybe a Cinderella rewrite and things like that, where people kind of play around with these themes. And sometimes they manage to do something different.
Right, yeah. Well, and it's always interesting what they do differently. Because, Gregor Maguire is who wrote Wicked.
Yes.
And all the other ones. And, he did, something from, the perspective of, the Ugly Stepsisters.
Yeah. Was it called The Ugly Stepsister? Or something like that?
The Ugly Stepsister or something like that.
Yep.
And then...
And I think Wicked was great. I enjoyed it very much, and I was very deeply confused when my friends... So, Wicked, the book, deals with really heavy themes like murder of people who you care about, like racism is a huge undertone through the whole thing, like between, like, you know, Elphaba is green, not that many other people, she goes to university and not that many other people there are green, and then there's like the, you know, sentient people who are non-humans and like the discrimination that they face. And so there's all these themes that are really, really, really heavy. And so my friends went to go see Wicked, and gosh, musical tickets were really expensive, so I sat that one out even though I really loved the book. They come back and I'm like, oh wow, how did they deal with X? How, what, wait, that didn't happen? What about Y? Like this other thing. I'm like throwing out all these different scenarios. I'm like, well, how did they tackle, you know, this, like, the themes of like racism and injustice in society? And they're just like, what are you talking about?
Right.
So like,
yeah.
even where there had been meaning, a lot of that meaning got stripped back out, back into a simpler story. And I still don't know what that story is, but something interesting was lost there. And so like maybe that same process, I wonder if it has repeated.
There was, I think it was, I now remember, I think it was Sarah Beth who would make me listen to the Wicked soundtrack, because she listened to musical soundtracks. Yeah. That's just what she did. And she, and from that I gathered that, because I've read Wicked as well, is they stripped out a lot of like anything political, anything like racism. It's just about like finding yourself and delighting in yourself, and like
I'm
a
sure
lot of
it's
people
still good. Like I'm still people love it. It must be a good story, but like, oh.
What I would say is, did you see Frozen?
Yes.
You've seen Wicked.
Ah, all right.
Because it's even got the same lead singer.
Yeah, that's true.
And Let It Go is apparently this like the same theme as Floating on Air or something like
gravity.
That.
You're close.
Defying Gravity. I'm sorry. But I would say with the book, I thought it was really it was a great idea. There's a lot of interesting things in it, but I was ultimately, and I think it's one of those things where I should probably just give it another chance and read it on its own terms. But like, I was ultimately just a little bit disappointed because the way, it might have been somebody pitched it to me this way.
It was probably me.
Or I just made it. I was going to be something that would fit into either the Oz books. Like you could read this along with those books, with like the Wizard of Oz, and it would like make sense, match up. Or you could watch the movie, the 1933 movie, and read the book, and they would line up you were getting like a scene from a different perspective. And
no, I wouldn't have given you that impression.
No, you wouldn't have. No, and so like I was just really disappointed because I'm like, okay, well, so this is a completely different world, and for me, I guess I was less interested in that, just because I was like, I would be interested in the story from the Wicked Witch of the West perspective, especially in the film. Just like I think if we were able to get some sort of insight into that character and that, you know, mentality, like everything that's going on with her, I think that could be really interesting. And the problem I had with Wicked is it was just like, okay, that's not the character.
Yeah, it's a different.
I'm not reading about her, and I'm not reading about the one-eyed witch in the book. You know, that like that when you look at the drawings looks ridiculous. She's got like goofy little like pigtails or something. But yeah, and like a wizard hat with like stars and shit on it. But yeah, I think I don't know. It was also one of those things where I was just like, man, it's a major character assassination on this wizard here, man. Wow. Like, just like total fascist here. Okay. Yeah, and there was just, I mean, it's definitely an interesting read, and I recommend it. Like, I think I definitely do want to read it again, just because I'm like, okay.
I have it on my
without that
bookshelf still, so.
Very nice. I had a copy for a long time. I don't know if I still have it. It might be buried in my pile of books I haven't read yet.
I might have sent you a copy a very long time ago. I have vague recollections.
Possibly, because yeah, I got it and I definitely read it. I just distinctly remember, like, there's a scene when she, like, in the rain, and that's when she realized. I think it's like that was when she realizes she's like can get killed by water or something, something like that. Or I just remember there's a scene in the rain, and it's like scary for her. And okay, do you remember this? Does it parse out why water melts her? And even in an allegorical sense or symbolic sense, because like the explanation that makes sense to me when it comes to say both the it's like the film and the book is water's purity, and because she's so evil, because she's so corrupted, you know, in the film and the book, that like the purity that is water destroys her. It's a similar thing to like holy water, and vampires and stuff like that. It's like it's pure, it's blessed, it's whatever. But I love, I don't know, I love making jokes related to the witch and the water thing, because it's the only time that a witch has ever melted because of water, and it's hilarious to me.
Yeah, I wonder how they came up with that.
I mean, I honestly, I want to say that I feel like in the book, I don't know, when you read the book, it feels very made up as it goes along, because that's how it feels. It's not as annoying as Alice in Wonderland, because Dorothy's a nice person who tries to befriend everybody she meets.
Yes.
And you know, and so like I that's what, so I'm with Dorothy. I like Dorothy. Although I will say, like, because I had never read the book until college, and so it was just one of those things where it's like, this is horrifying. Again, going back to horrifying folktales, the story of the Tin Man.
Yeah, that's the sad one. The real story of the Tin Man's very sad.
He keeps accidentally chopping off parts of himself until there's nothing left.
Yep. And then it doesn't, like, his wife leaves him because he doesn't have a heart.
It wasn't his wife. It was his, like, he fell in love with this girl, and he would be chopping and thinking about her, and he would be so distracted.
Yes, that's right.
He chopped off parts of himself, and he'd go to the tinsmith, and he'd make him a new hand.
Don't daydream about beautiful ladies. There's our...
While you're chopping wood. Yeah. Which is so crazy. It's just that's very graphic.
Yes.
Like, chopping off parts. But it's just in the kids' book, like, whatever.
Yep.
I don't know. I don't know how you feel about it, but I don't like nerfing stuff for kids.
You don't like what?
There's some nerfing stuff for kids, like the softening up of certain things. Like, I'm okay with kids. Like, I'm okay with making a movie that's supposed to be scary that's also for kids, because I think it's good to get scared sometimes, because I think one, just it's you know, there's the feeling of relief after you were scared is such a good feeling. It's like, you need to know that, but also, I don't know, like, there's I mean, why do people go to haunted houses? Why do people ride roller coasters? I don't know that.
I don't like haunted houses. But no, I think it's important. Like, one of the things we kind of learned in that class is, like, there are these more serious themes in children's literature, they've always been there, and that like no matter how hard you might try to protect a child from like that, you know, like bad things happening in life, the bad things do happen in life, and so like yeah, I think having ways that stories can be told in like maybe challenging but age appropriate ways, like as children's material, as something that like parents can chat about with their kids and like experience together, as opposed to like, you know, the kids sneaking it later. Like a lot of kids watch
Right.
stuff that is definitely for adults. So like unless they're
Right. Yeah.
creating unless there's content being created that is a little bit edgy but still aimed at kids, then like I don't.
Well,
There's a
they
space for
used
that.
to make that.
There's a space for it.
But they used to make stuff like that. I mean, as fucked up as it is and as scary as it was, like I watched Return to Oz as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's creepy.
I read a horror book. One of my favorite series as a kid was a horror series that was called, oh my goodness. It had a title that was very similar in cadence to The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It was like The Mummy, the Secret, and the Key, or something like that. It was terrifying, and I mean, I don't think there was much horror literature for kids, and that one was written very much as a, it had some sort of lesson. It followed the arc that we learned about of like, there's the setup and there's the lesson, and like be a good kid and good things will happen to you. Like that whole thing played out, but in the context of a very scary story. And like I don't think it harmed me at all to read scary stories.
No, yeah, I don't think it is harmful. Like, I don't know. There's something to be said. Just yeah, like, I'm not for kids watching stuff that isn't for them, but I'm fine with like making stuff that is for them that can have some scares in it. Some spooky and creepy because it's fun. I don't know. I think it's fun. Man. Yeah, I remember like because we did we read Harry Potter in that class?
I think we might have read a few chapters of Harry Potter because it was such a long book.
Right. We read a bunch of books in that one because we also did Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobes, right?
Yeah, that one's a lot shorter than Harry Potter, but
sure, yeah.
We definitely talked about Harry Potter.
But the big theme that kept coming up is the dead parents.
Mm-hmm.
Because I love this in terms of story-wise, the function of that is like get the parents out of the way so the kid can have an adventure. Because if the parents are there, they're gonna stop the kid from doing anything.
The other thing though is that like losing your parents is like the scariest thing that could happen to a kid. Isn't that? That's right, kind of like, oh, you want to talk about like what are scary things that could be traumatic to a child? It's not mummies and Frankenstein and like. The idea of like not having the people who they depend on as their caretakers, so.
Right? Or to me, even scary, or possibly even scarier than that, is having, but maybe even more dramatic, is having those people turn on you,
like Coraline,
mm-hmm. And also like Hansel and Gretel.
Mm-hmm.
Hansel and Gretel's super fucked up. That's a super fucked up story. It's just like we're all starving. We're gonna leave you in the woods to die.
Oh, there's another good connection with the Witcher game. Did you play The Witcher 3 yet?
I haven't been able to because I'm on a Mac and I can't play it.
Very sad. Anyway, spoiler alert. I won't say the actual spoiler actually if you haven't played it, but there's that. It plays with that theme. I'll say that.
Cool. So yeah, I like seeing these things appear in other stories. I don't know. In terms of reinventing folk tales, I feel like that's a whole other conversation we could even do. Is like, or just pick one that we can
Maybe I
read
can watch
and talk
the
about?
latest season of Disenchanted, and I'll have so many opinions.
Oh my, yes.
Have you seen that yet?
I watched the first season, and then when the second season came out, I'm like, oh, I want to watch that, and I completely spaced on it. Now there's the third season, so I need to catch up.
I have so many opinions on Disenchanted, but they've all kind of faded into the background. Like, I forgot because they're not fresh anymore, and I'm sure that if I watch the latest season, they'll come back.
So yeah, because I just remember it took getting used to the idea that it was going to be an ongoing story rather than an episodic show. Just because I'm used to that with Matt Groening, is like we're gonna tell 20 minutes worth of gags with characters, and then it's over, and then you can watch it in any order, and that's one of the things I really like about like Futurama and The Simpsons and stuff, is that you can watch any episode. You can just be like, I love that episode because it's so funny because they're talking about this, and then you don't have to worry about what part of the season was that in and what was the big story they're telling. And so it just took me getting used to that for Disenchantment. But I was like, oh, there's some cool stuff going on here. We have elves and a demon cat thing.
Yes. And the princess.
And a princess. Did you ever want to be a princess?
Did I ever want to be a princess?
Yeah.
I was a princess once for Halloween. So I guess the answer is yes. I think I was 4 years old.
See, I feel like your parents made that choice, honestly.
Probably.
Or at least influenced
it. Was pretty cool. My mom sewed my dress. It was neat. Was I a princess for Halloween one more time after that? I might have been. Mostly, the things I wanted to be when I was a kid, though, I wanted to be a firefighter. But then I was like, well, that's dangerous, and people are really heavy. And then I wanted to be an ice skater. But ice skating is very hard. My parents got me ice skating lessons once, and I'm not I have very little natural balance. I was very determined, and I did pretty okay, but I learned very quickly that spinning and jumping and things were not that achievable compared to how much effort I was actually willing to put in. And then I wanted to be a paleontologist, but I was afraid that I would accidentally dig up mummies. And then I also learned that they just scrape away at bones with dental tools most of the time, and that didn't sound exciting to me. So, princess wasn't very high on that list.
Clearly, yeah. And I think part of it is like, really it's like, what do you do as a princess? Because it seems like a lot of what you your whole process you're talking about there was like, if I'm going to be a firefighter, I'm going into fires, and I'm like carrying people out of fires.
They're very active things. All of these are very active.
They're all or just you're all like, you're very you're like looking at things as a thing you do rather than a thing you are.
Don't we have an interesting modern story then with the whole like British monarchy with the prince and princess going to Canada?
Oh, right, yeah.
Basically, we don't want to be a prince and princess.
We want to be regular people.
We want to be regular people. What are they doing? That's the real question. I think it's not what do you do when you're a princess. It's what does a princess who's not a princess anymore do?
Right.
Probably the same thing she did before, but
Probably, yeah. Probably, yeah. And I think it's like that's I don't know. That's an interesting idea behind it. Is like selling this idea of be a princess, but really that means, like, at least from like most story perspective, it's like do nothing. Like be something that people want. I guess that's really it. That's like, be sweet and harmless, and that's about it. Like
being pretty
get captured
and rich
by a dragon.
Yeah.
Be pretty and rich.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which don't we all? I wouldn't mind being pretty and rich, honestly. uh, but I also would want other things, and I think that idea is changing, or is not as prominent as it used to be. I don't think we'll ever get rid of like being a princess or whatever, but you know, we're gonna get more princesses like say Zelda,
Mm-hmm.
who has since her first outing, which wasn't really an outing, has become more of an active character. Because she's got the chic
Yeah.
persona, so where she dresses up and does like counterintelligence.
Yeah. I wasn't that satisfied with her character writing in the Breath of the Wild. I don't have any nostalgia factor though, because I didn't really play most of the Zelda games. But I think also Princess Jasmine from the Disney adaptation of Aladdin is like.
I mean, the animated adaptation.
Yes, the animated adaptation.
They're both technically Disney.
The animated adaptation, where this idea that like being the life of a princess isn't everything it's chalked up to be. That yep. Having your freedom to make your own decisions is more important than being pampered and enjoying having nothing to do.
Right. Well, then in similar era, you have Belle,
mm-hmm.
who is not part of the nobility or gentry. She's a common person who's educated, or at least literate, and that's pretty much her character.
Yeah, that's kind of it. That's kind of it.
She's nice and literate,
yes.
And that's pretty much her character, which not bad. Step in the right direction, mm-hmm. I guess. And then you have Tiana, who is at least who becomes a princess,
mm-hmm.
but it starts off as a small business owner.
Yep.
Yeah, which I feel like, every era we come kind of closer to like a more practical, down to earth idea of people. Like we kind of give them more to be than just like the archetype.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think archetypes are useful in examination, but in terms of like creating characters like from them, you have to embellish.
Can we talk about
shine those up?
Tangled at some point? Is that a possible topic?
Sure, yeah. Is that in a positive or?
I really enjoyed it, but I also I think it's interesting from the angle of like what does it look like to take these stories and make them more human, and how human is too human.
Yes.
I have some thoughts on that one.
That's a good one. Yeah, we should definitely talk about that. I'll have to rewatch it, sure, as well, or beforehand, just to make sure that I have enough to say about it, because I just remember being like, oh, it's fine. I don't know. Dame Gothel wasn't as intimidating as I wanted her to be, because Dame Gothel in the original story is just this weirdo who grows radishes and like tricks a guy with a pregnant wife into like giving him his baby for radishes.
Oh.
Because she's literally has like a pregnancy like craving for radishes. And I just also love that when they hand over the baby, the Dame Gothel is like, she's I'm gonna call this girl Radish, because that's what Rapunzel is.
Really?
I'm gonna call her Radishes.
For real?
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, Radish girl. And so it's just a fuck you to the parents, and then the parents are gone, and they don't try to get her back, which is
that's
not part of it. Well, they're commoners. They're not. Yeah. She's not a princess. Which that's one of the things I like about the original story, is that it is a story about a commoner. She definitely becomes. It's not even clear that she becomes a princess, because that original story is so. It's a surprising one.
I'll have to reread
some
the
like
original
interesting
as
stuff.
well.
Yes, so that's it's cool. We could do that. We can do that sometime soon if we want.
Sounds good.
But yes, all right. We've been talking for an hour and 30 minutes about stuffs. That's good.
Cool.
That's a good amount of time to talk about stuff, but it's also not the shortest amount of time we've talked because there's been many a time where you were supposed to have left like my driveway or my parents' driveway and just chatted long into the night about whatever we were talking about before.
You live so far from campus too.
I did live so far from campus.
Whenever I have to drive very late at night, I often think about that drive that it took to get to your parents' house.
It happened a lot because, yeah, you would come over, we would either watch something or do the fire thing at the back. And yeah, and then it was the driveway conversation that would just last and last.
Mm-hmm.